Watch and Learn, hosted by the Lillooet Learning Community Society. We're recording this. There's no one attending on Zoom, but we have a small room full of people here who are participating. But we want to make it available to a wider audience. So I will be recording this for the future. So I'm going to share my screen and get my little slideshow together. And start. Where's the start button?
So go to the top and that little, there.
Yeah. There we go. So, this is about what it takes to run a society. So societies have to have a specific mandate. They're run by a board of directors who do not receive any profit for their participation. One of the reasons you might want to start a society is because societies make good things happen. If you look at a small community like ours, pretty much all the fun cultural things that are happening here are being done by nonprofits. We got minor hockey, we have the music society, we have the hub, we have the library, and that's where all of this sort of social development work is happening. And one of the reasons that we pulled this meeting together is that often the funding that you can get is directly tied to what your constitution and bylaws have in them. So these slides, we can make them available so you can get all the links on them. This is just a little sort of chart that shows some of the benefits of being a nonprofit rather than being a for-profit. A lot of the things that we might want to do, you could run as a business, but being a nonprofit is definitely advantageous for something that's not going to make money. And it's true that it's hard for arts and culture to make money. So, the nonprofit model is to our advantage, and we are very lucky to have this under the law.
You can walk through.
It's fine. It's fine. So I'm not going to read to you. You guys can read that. And are there any questions about those differences?
I guess it would be good to note that there's also like subcategories within all of those things if you want to get more detail. Like I know there is a difference between non-profit and non-for-profit, and it has to do with donation receipts and like a charity versus just a non-profit society. There is like some further breakdown.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you want to start a society in British Columbia, it is governed by the Societies Act. And it's a pretty easy piece of legislation to read. I don't find, it has some legal moments where you're like, what does that mean? But for the most part, it's really easy to understand. And if you want to start a society, that is the first place you should go. The link's down there. Go read the act and just get a sense of, because this is like telling you the rules you must follow. So this is a short video that I'm not going to play here right now, but it is American, so some of the terminology is different, but the idea is the same. But she does a good job of just saying, so you want to be on a board of directors? This is what you need to think about. That as a board member, you are responsible for the organization. You have a legal responsibility defined by the Societies Act, and you have to keep on top of what's happening there. And so she does a really fun way of sort of running that down, but she doesn't like make it. She does it in a lively way where you're like, yeah, I could do that. Yeah. some really excellent resources available to us. And so I've put, these are the ones that I refer to often. So the Law for Nonprofits is a project of the Law Foundation of BC, and it basically could answer almost any question you might have. Click Law also, I think, is funded by the Law Foundation, which I want to say, like, the Law Foundation is amazing. It is a foundation of lawyers of BC put money in, and then they fund all this incredible public outreach. Click Law's mission is to provide equal access to legal help for people all over BC on one website, and they have a whole bunch of resources for nonprofits there. And then just the BC government, BC Registries has a really good checklist here on, so you want to start a nonprofit, these are the things you need to, that's what you need to do. And from those sources, I have just a really brief startup checklist. You need to recruit your officers and directors. You need a minimum of 3 people. There's no maximum, but you have to have at least 3 people who say they're going to sign on. And there's a legal paperwork. You have to get them all to fill out the forms. You have to pick and reserve your name. You can't, if someone else has the same name somewhere in the province, there's a registrar and you can't use it. So you have to, have something that's unique. You have to determine your purpose, which is basically writing your constitution. And then you have to prepare your bylaws. Fortunately, the BC Societies Act has a sample set of bylaws, like just a boilerplate. So you can take that and just work it up for your own purposes. Then you have to take all that stuff, go online and file it, and then you can open a bank account. And then the maintenance checklist, like every year, like you have to keep your files organized and in a safe place. There's privacy law that you will have to pay attention to. And the main thing you have to do is you have to hold an annual general meeting every year where you make a financial report, and you elect the next set of directors. And then once you've done that, you have to tell the registrar of BC that you have done that, and it costs once a year $40. You upload through BCEID the record of your annual general meeting and who is on your board of directors, and that's like public information. So someone who has signed up and said, yes, I'm on the board, for instance, if you've gotten established enough that you have a Canada Revenue Agency account, and you're a registered charity, anyone can go and look up who's on the board of this organization.
They can look through the BC Registry of Nonprofits.
Yeah, they can do that well. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so there's
to be a charity to be
transparent. That's true. That's right. Any nonprofit, you can go to the BC Registry as well and see who's on the board. You had a question?
Yeah, in terms of the startup checklist, if you were going to do like the bare minimum, how long do you think that would take?
Day and a half.
Okay, a day and a half, people.
Okay. Yeah. One of the legal requirements is you have to have a minimum of 6 board meetings a year, right? What's that?
The National Society is like 3.
Right. Well, I think
but the executive has more.
Yeah. You can have.
The executive, I think.
There are some fine points there, and also you can sometimes. There's places where the Societies Act will say a rule, but they'll say, oh, if your bylaws want to change this a bit, you can. So for instance, the legal age is 18. You have to be 18 or older to serve on a board, but any organization can make a bylaw that they're going to have youth representation. And then you can have someone who's 16 or whatever, So, and again, in those legal resources that I supplied, there's some good charts that show, where in the Societies Act you can kind of make your own rules. So, yeah, and I think, I'll just keep going on this. So, like, at one point, Megan asks me, so what does it take to have a society? Well, for one thing, you have to comply with the law. If you don't comply with the law, eventually it will catch up with you and you'll have problems. You need at least 3 passionate and committed individuals to serve as board members. And people that you really know you can work with and get this going. You need a good bookkeeper. And I mean, it's one thing, like, I think many of us could learn to do the basic bookkeeping for a small society. If you have $20,000 a year or something like that, I could do that. But once you're looking at more money, and if you have multiple funders who all want you to report on different things, then you need a bookkeeper who understands nonprofit accounting. And you can go and read the what is it called? The Finance Act, the BC Financial Act, that has all sorts of other rules about how you keep your books and things like that. But you need someone who's willing to take that on. And you also need members of your board who can understand the financials and oversee them carefully. I feel like you have to have a really strong sense of your mandate and purpose. Like, why are you doing this? And that, having a strategic plan, having like really good constitution and bylaws that express what you're trying to do is really helpful. And then for me, like, the 5th one is a little bit hard to articulate, but I feel it's really important that you recognize that the people who are putting this effort forward are doing it because they want to belong. And that part of being a board member, part of having a society, is about creating a better community, connecting with people, empowering people. And so, like, it's really, like, you can, when you're doing board work, you can get really bogged down in the bureaucracy and forget that actually it's nice to get together with a group of like-minded people every other month and talk about it and work on the things that you love. And so trying to keep that energy intact, I think, is really important. And
another comment on that is I mean, that is why lots of societies, like, there are lots of societies, because there are so many, like, specific things that people value. Mm-hmm. And to have another society made for something really specific where you have a team that's really passionate, I think, is important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Any other thoughts on that? Like, Betty, you've served on many boards. Like, what do you think it is that helps them keep going?
Yeah, I think the coming together and focusing on something that a group of people is passionate about is a great driver.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that keeps them going, though, is that they actually have some successes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It gets very frustrating when you run into too many roadblocks in a row, mm-hmm. and one of those roadblocks is people burning out, because you only need 3 to start a society, but you really do need more than 3 to keep a society going. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the recruitment of new directors is what I've seen kill societies.
Yeah, and so
the lack of it, or
being unable to recruit more.
The difficulty in getting more. This was something that Meg pulled just to show, like, that what she was saying before is that there's, like, a lot of there's quite a bit of stretch room in what a nonprofit can be. Mm-hmm. And, there's the cooperative model. That's, co-ops are actually governed under another set of laws. But so that's actually, like, if you're looking at trying to hybridize and do both nonprofit and, like, some commercial things, then a cooperative can be a really good way to to achieve that, and that, yeah, the ultimate nonprofit is when you get charity status. And that is it's a bit more work, like a lot more work.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot more work. In that that's another level of, another layer of reporting, another layer of like keeping your books really carefully for the charities report. And I have never gone through the process of applying for charity status, so I'm not clear on how much work that is. There's definite benefits to it, but if you have charitable status, you cannot do enterprise development. It really, yeah. So
when in early days of Lillooet Learns, Lillooet Learning Community Society, we looked at getting charitable status. And at the time, it was the Harper government, and they were really worried about charities being used to fund terrorist organizations, and they set up hurdles by the million for new charities to exist. They were weeding out charities at that time. It may have gotten easier since then, but at the time, it was next to impossible to start a new charity. Yeah. So hopefully it's easier now, but at this moment in time, I'm not willing to go there.
right.
Yeah, and I will comment from a different, more recent webinar this year. You actually can do an enterprising business as a charity, but the rule is it has to directly relate to the charity's mandate. Whereas if a nonprofit is doing it, it's a little bit more.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. It was my understanding from that.
But basically, like what this chart is about is like, how are you going to get your money? Because, I mean, of course, there's little tiny nonprofits that hardly need any money. But then they probably don't even want to start a society. But if you are actually at the point of like starting a legal organization, then you're going to need money. So how are you going to get it? Well, I mean, I think for the most part, we're grant writers. But there are other ways. So that's all. So we can have some questions. Maybe I'll have a couple of questions for the recording if you have anything general at all to ask. And if not, we'll end the recording so that we can. Any general questions?
Maybe more details on being a board member then.
Okay.
Because that's the important positions to fill.
Well, being a board member, I think there's a few things that are really, really important. One is you show up when you say you're going to show up, and you commit to preparing. You come to the board meeting having read what was sent before, ready and able to actually discuss what issues are going on. You have to understand confidentiality. If you're hiring, like once you are an employer, then you have employment law that you have to pay attention to. One of the really important points is that as a board member, you are part of a group. No one person on the board has more power than anybody else on the board. You speak and act as a group. You never, so like, and it's really like if you were at a board meeting and didn't agree with the decision that was made, if the board said that's what we're doing, then you get behind it and you go with the rest. Or you say, no, we're not leaving this meeting until we come to an agreement that is everyone agrees with or whatever. But, you know, I think sometimes people think, oh, well, I'm the chair. I get to just do whatever I want. And no, the chair's job is to create the unified judgment of the rest of the group and make sure that everyone's together. And that when you go out into the community, if you're talking about your organization, you're saying things that everyone's agreed about. You don't sort of say, oh, yeah, we'll sign up and do that event next year if you haven't talked to everybody else, that kind of thing.
or come to an agreement. You don't actually agree with it, but you let it go ahead, and then you go out later and say, well, they just pushed this through, and I'm not behind it at all. Right, that you distance yourself from a board decision. That is not acceptable as a member.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes you might actually be like, well, I don't agree with this exactly, or I don't want to do it, but if you guys are going to, okay, I'll stand aside, and that's all right. But then you don't go around the community like saying bad things about it. You just say, oh, I'm not involved with that, or something, Yeah.
Can you just be up there at the space or the space?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
And so how you run your meetings is up to you. And it should be defined in your bylaws. You can say that your consensus, you use Robert's rules, or the better ones are the democratic rules of order. If people aren't familiar with that, it's a very, very simplified. It's very similar to Robert's Rules of Order, but Robert's Rules of Order is a book this thick. The democratic rules of order you can fit on a one-pager, and so that everyone can understand this is how we're running our meeting. So it is a nice option to remember that you don't have to use Robert's rules, because then you'd have to have like 10 workshops on how to run a meeting. What else about being a good board member? I mean, I've worked on boards that had no staff, and where you're a working board, and so then it's having a willingness to show up for more than just your board meetings. And then I've also been on a board where we are supervising staff, and then I feel like once you have staff, you have to commit to being a good employer and caring about your staff person or your staff people, and being their champion and having their back in the community and making sure that they're supported in their work and all of that. So, yeah.
And frequently coaching.
Yeah, coaching staff.
So for a smaller group of people that just wanted to start a society, generally they would be basically a working board, because it would be all that setup work, and maybe if you are going to go for grants, there's going to be that sort of all that upfront setting up of things, strategizing, and maybe assigning roles. Like if you only have 3 people, it also is probably a good idea to be like, okay, what skills do we have here? Like, are we going to actually be able to do this with the skills that we have in our initial team?
Yeah, there's some really great, Board Source I should have put that one up there, but it's called Board Source, and it's a support organization for nonprofit boards, and they do really good little trainings and stuff of how to do a strategic plan, how to do a hiring properly, that kind of thing. And one of the resources I remember is they had a board skills matrix kind of thing. So you get your people together and you look at what your strengths are, and then, we don't have someone with HR experience, or we don't have someone with finance experience, and then you start thinking who you can grab who can help you.
So those are probably key things to at least think about when you start up. But you also don't want to let that totally inhibit you. You don't want to make it so that you try and find the perfect team before you start your initiative. I mean, people are varying opinions on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just to, as we're talking, you can see, okay, yeah, you can do a bunch of paperwork in an afternoon, the first initial thing, but then the work of, if you want to do the grant writing, that's a lot of work to do as a volunteer. And I mean, that's part of why Lillooet Learns has been doing this hub project, because people need to learn those skills. They need support to do that work. So there, you know, we do have some people in town who could help, but it's still like someone's going to have to sign it. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, I was curious. So you have a working board. Do you have any experience, or have you looked at any of the rules surrounding like basically board members cannot also work for the society? Mm-hmm. So that's something to keep in mind too. Like if you're writing a grant and it had like time in there to do certain things, then that person would have to be separate from
well, it's interesting though, because that's not entirely true. If you go and read the Societies Act, I just was going over this. Board members can be paid to do work for the society that isn't board work, and you have to make a note of that on your financials. But you are allowed, like you could even have your treasurer be contracted to be the bookkeeper. You just have to say that's what you're doing. I also have been reading that you can make a bylaw that says we are going to compensate board members. And that was an interesting thing for me, because I am seeing that, like, that to me, this sort of structure developed at a time when most families were supported by one person working. And so now, in the modern age, like, people just don't have the same amount of time. And I sometimes wonder if having a bit of compensation to serve as a board member might make it more, like, reduce some of the barriers for young people, for Indigenous people to participate. So that's just a thing I'm exploring. But
for women with children.
Yeah, for women with children. And
they're paying daycare.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then that's another thing. Like, you can find ways, you know, like you can pay board members for their expenses of like the travel that they take, or if they need childcare to attend the meeting, you can put out money for those things to support people to participate.
So they can't be employees, but they can be compensated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you were really worried about it legally, you could explicitly add something about this in your bylaw.
Yeah.
Most people, if you're just starting up, are using the boilerplate bylaws, but you can basically add anything in there. So that's
not true. You can't. Well, you can add things that the act allows. You can't make your bylaws go past the act. She wants to be queen of the world. Yeah. So your bylaws have to comply with the act. Yeah. Well, I think that's it for the recording. And if anyone who's watching this has any other questions, you can reach us here. There's a couple more coming up, and you can get in touch with us at the Lillooet Hub.
And will we be sent a link for this presentation slides?
Absolutely,
We'll
yes.
be sent the link, and then just to speak about the other Lunch and Learns, like the one next week, it's going to be pretty similar, recorded, but kind of go into the realm of social enterprise and relating to the Society Act and the Corporation Act in BC. And I'm going to school for this right now and learning a bunch of really awesome things. So I'm kind of just going to share everything I'm learning and different social innovation terms, which I think is going to also help explain and begin explaining to the community the story more of what the Community Connect Innovation Hub is actually, trying to do. And then, the week after that, we're going to have the Chamber of Commerce here, and they're going to be presenting, and I'll be attending as well, our plans for next year and the curriculum that we've developed as a Baseline basically to launch a Lillooet Entrepreneur Accelerator program. So we're going to be providing mentorship to help people grow their businesses, but also more to help them build the baseline skills to be a business owner or entrepreneur, which we see in the community. So, yeah, right. There's going to be basically more information about that then. So, yeah, and if you want to be on a